Some stories sound too strange to be real until they happen to someone you could easily be. What you're about to hear was sent to me by a man who swears every word is true. He didn't grow up in a haunted house. He didn't play with Ouija boards. He just lived an ordinary life until a doll in his family's home began to move on its own. This is his story of the doll that turned its head. I grew up in a quiet part of the countryside where time seemed to move slower and nights carried a silence so thick you could almost hear your own thoughts echo. My parents still live there. A small, two-story farmhouse surrounded by tall poplar trees, a gravel driveway, and a narrow creek that runs just behind the fence. It's not an old Gothic place or anything. Just a lived-in, slightly worn home where every step on the floorboards tells you where you are. The kind of house that smells like rain, wood polish, and old family memories. When I moved out at 19, I told myself I'd never live that far from town again. But after Dad's heart surgery last spring, I came back. I took a leave from work and stayed with my parents to help out for a few months. I thought it'd be peaceful. Just the three of us again like when I was a kid. For the first few weeks, it was. Mornings were filled with the sound of birds in the trees, Mom humming while she cooked, and Dad sitting in his armchair with his newspaper, pretending not to fall asleep mid-sentence. But then, around the second week, something odd happened. It started small, like all strange things do. One evening, while cleaning the attic, I came across an old cardboard box labeled Emily's Things. My mom looked up when I mentioned it and said, "Oh, that's your cousin's. She used to stay here when her parents were traveling." Inside the box was mostly junk. Faded coloring books, a broken hairbrush, a few storybooks with torn covers. But right at the bottom, wrapped in an old baby blanket, was a porcelain doll. It had soft brown curls, blue glass eyes, and a pale painted face that was cracked slightly across one cheek. Its lips were parted in the faintest smile, and its head leaned to the side like it was listening. Mom looked at it for a moment when I brought it downstairs. "Oh, that thing? Emily was obsessed with it," she said. "Don't tell me it's still around." She laughed and took it from me. "I'll just keep it on the shelf for now. It's kind of pretty." She placed it on the living room shelf above the fireplace, the same one where we kept old photos and Dad's dusty collection of ceramic birds. That night after dinner, I remember sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, while Mom watched TV. The doll sat quietly on the shelf, its head tilted, staring toward the couch. The light from the screen glinted off its glassy eyes, and for a moment I swear it looked like its gaze shifted slightly, like it wasn't just facing me but watching me. I laughed it off, told myself it was the flicker from the television. The next morning, though, I noticed something strange. The doll wasn't on the shelf anymore. It was on the side table next to the couch, its head still tilted, its blank eyes catching the morning light. I figured Mom must have moved it, but when I asked her later, she frowned and said, "I didn't touch it. Maybe your dad." Dad shook his head, his eyes still half, buried in the newspaper. I didn't even know we still had that thing. It wasn't enough to worry about, just weird. But that night, as I turned off the TV and went upstairs, I glanced back at the living room. The light from the hallway fell across the doll, and for some reason it looked different. Its head seemed straighter, less tilted than before. Again, I brushed it off. My mind was playing tricks. The following evening, we had dinner early. Mom and Dad went to bed soon after. I stayed downstairs, sitting by the window watching the night sky. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock and the distant hum of crickets. At one point, I heard something faint, a soft tap, tap, tap. It came from the direction of the fireplace. I looked over, half expecting to see the cat pawing at something, but the room was empty. Just the flickering shadows from the dying fire. The tapping stopped. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and turned back toward the window. Then I heard it again. Not tapping this time, but something softer. A creak, like the sound of porcelain brushing against wood. I turned slowly. The doll was facing the window. I remember freezing, my pulse in my throat. I stared at it for what felt like a full minute, waiting for it to move again. It didn't. Finally, I got up, walked over, picked it up, and placed it back on the shelf. "Stay there," I muttered, half joking, half nervous. I went to bed after that, telling myself there had to be some logical explanation. Gravity, my imagination. A shift in the house's old wood. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I could still hear the faint sound of wood creaking downstairs. Not random, not settling. Rhythmic, like small steps. And I swear it stopped right below my bedroom door. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I drifted close to sleep, I'd hear something. A creak, a shift, a faint scrape. It wasn't loud enough to be certain, but it was there, always near the door. By morning, I told myself it was just the old house. It had always made noises, expanding wood temperature changes, rats in the walls. I'd grown up with it. But that morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been listening. Downstairs, the living room was calm. The morning light streamed through the curtains, warm and harmless. The doll sat exactly where I'd left it, on the fireplace shelf, facing forward again, its porcelain cheek catching the light. I laughed to myself. "You're really losing it," I whispered. Mom looked up from the kitchen. "What was that?" "Nothing. Just talking to myself." She smirked. "You've been doing that a lot lately." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overworked, overtired, or just uneasy being back home. The house held too many memories. Some good, some heavy. Still, I couldn't shake that quiet unease that lingered every time I looked at that doll. That night, after dinner, Mom sat knitting while Dad watched the news. I noticed the doll again, its head slightly turned, not much, just enough that it wasn't facing straight anymore. I pointed at it. "Did either of you move that?" Mom didn't even look up. "Move what?" "The doll. It's looking sideways now." Dad grunted. "Maybe the shelf's uneven." I walked closer. The head really was turned, maybe 10 degrees to the right. It wasn't imagination. I could see the faint line of dust beneath its base, showing exactly where it had been before. I reached out and gently turned it back to face forward. Its head was surprisingly stiff, like it resisted the motion. The porcelain was cold under my fingers. Too cold. That night, I dreamed about it. In the dream, I was sitting in the living room, the house completely dark except for the faint glow from the fireplace. The doll sat on the shelf, but I couldn't see its face clearly. I knew it was watching. Every time I blinked, it was closer. First on the shelf, then on the side table, then sitting right at my feet, its head tilted upward. When I woke, my throat was dry and my heart was racing. I could still hear the echo of footsteps in my ears. Small, slow, deliberate. It was 3:17 a.m. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and listened. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock downstairs. Then came a soft sound, like something brushing against the wall in the hallway outside my room. I froze. Scrape, then silence. I turned on my bedside lamp. The yellow light filled the room, chasing away the dark corners. But my door was open now, just a few inches. I didn't remember leaving it that way. I got up, walked over, and slowly pushed it closed. My hand lingered on the doorknob for a second before I locked it. I never used to lock my bedroom door. By morning, I convinced myself it was nothing. Another dream bleeding into reality. But when I came down for breakfast, Mom was frowning. "You didn't come downstairs last night." "Did you?" "No."
Why?
Her expression tightened. "I heard someone walking around 3. Thought it might have been you." My skin prickled. "No, I was asleep." Dad looked up from his paper. "Old house, Martha. Wood contracts. You both need to stop watching those ghost shows before bed." I smiled, trying to match his tone, but deep down, something in me shifted. It wasn't just in my head anymore. That afternoon, I decided to test it. I moved the doll from the living room shelf to the hallway cabinet. I turned its head to face the wall and went upstairs. When I came down 2 hours later, it was facing the hallway again. I stood there staring at it. My pulse thudded in my ears. I didn't tell my parents that time. I didn't even want to look at the thing anymore. That evening, I covered it with a towel. I told myself it was silly, but somehow, not seeing its face helped. Around midnight, the power went out. The house fell into complete darkness. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the black, pale, thin, trembling light. I went downstairs to check the breaker. As I passed the living room, I noticed the towel on the floor. The doll was uncovered. Its head was turned toward me. I froze there, light trembling in my hand. For a long second, I just stared at the painted eyes that seemed to reflect the light back with something deeper behind them. Then, slowly, I backed away. When the power flickered back on, the lights buzzed, filling the house with that familiar hum again. I took a deep breath, turned away from the fireplace, and told myself one last time, it's just a coincidence. Just gravity. Just nerves. But later that night, when I passed the living room again on my way upstairs, something caught my attention. The doll's head wasn't tilted anymore. It was straight. Dead straight. And for the first time, its lips looked different. Not a faint smile now, but something tighter. I tried to ignore it. I really did. For 2 days after that night, I avoided the living room altogether. I stayed upstairs, helped Dad with his medicine, helped Mom with chores, tried to pretend that everything was normal. But even while I worked, I could feel it, the weight of something downstairs, like a static charge in the air, like being watched through a keyhole. On the third morning, while Mom was tending to the garden, I finally decided to get rid of it. I told myself it was just a toy, porcelain, glass, paint, and nothing else. Nothing that could move, watch, or think. So I went into the living room. The morning light poured through the curtains, soft and gold, but the air felt different, thicker, somehow heavier. The doll sat on the shelf, its painted eyes catching the light. I stared at it for a long time. My reflection shimmered faintly in its glossy pupils. "All right," I muttered, "this ends now." I picked it up. It felt colder than I remembered, almost metallic. The porcelain skin chilled my palms. I grabbed an old shoebox, stuffed the doll inside, taped it shut, and carried it out to the shed behind the house. The shed hadn't been opened in years. The air inside smelled of rust and soil. I pushed the box onto a high shelf, turned the key in the padlock, and left it there. For the first time in weeks, I felt relief, like I'd finally shut a door that shouldn't have been open. That night, the house was quiet again. We had dinner, laughed a little, watched the evening news. Even Mom said, "You're finally smiling again." I went to bed early, the sense of normalcy washing back over me. But around 20:45 am, I woke up suddenly. Not to sound, but to cold. The room was freezing. My breath came out in faint white mist. I could hear the wind pressing against the windows, but beneath it was another sound, slow, steady tapping, like porcelain on wood. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the hallway. I sat up listening. The tapping stopped. For a moment, I thought maybe it was the pipes, but then came a soft creak, the kind made by small, careful steps. Then silence. I got out of bed, heart pounding, and opened the door just a crack. The hallway was empty, dimly lit by the nightlight at the end. I whispered, "Mom, Dad." No answer. I stepped out, the floor groaning beneath me. My pulse thudded in my ears as I moved toward the staircase. The air smelled faintly like dust and rain. Halfway down the stairs, I stopped. The door to the shed, the one I'd locked that morning, was open. I could see it from the window. Just a sliver, but open. The padlock dangled from the latch, broken clean off. I froze, every nerve screaming. I didn't want to go outside, but something in me needed to know. So I went out, barefoot on the cold floorboards, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The wind had died completely. The night was eerily still. When I reached the shed, the air inside was colder than outside. My breath fogged as I stepped in. The shelves were covered in dust, the faint smell of oil and rust hanging in the air. The box was gone. In its place on the wooden shelf sat the doll. Its head was tilted, not sideways this time, but slightly down, like it was looking at the floor. And beneath it, written faintly in the dust, were 4 letters, HELP. I stumbled back, slamming the shade door shut. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the latch. When I got back to the house, I locked every door, every window double, checked them all. I sat on the couch, clutching the flashlight until dawn. When Mom came downstairs and saw me sitting there, she frowned. "Why are you up so early?" I didn't know what to say. I thought I heard something outside. She shook her head, half smiling. "You're jumpy lately. Maybe you should take a break from coffee." Dad mumbled from behind his newspaper. "That's what I've been saying. He's wound up like a spring." I wanted to tell them. I wanted to explain everything. The tapping, the cold, the doll in the shed. But I knew how it would sound. So I kept quiet. That evening, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and froze. Behind me, just at the edge of the frame, on the hallway cabinet, sat the doll. Back inside the house, its head slightly turned toward me. I spun around, and it was gone. The cabinet was empty. I stood there, heart pounding, until I heard a voice from the kitchen. "Dinner's ready," Mom called. I turned, trying to calm myself, and saw something move in the corner of my eye. Just a shadow, I thought. But when I looked again, the reflection in the glass cabinet door showed something standing behind me. Small, motionless, pale. I turned around fast. Nothing. Just the cold draft rolling through the house. I started sleeping with the lights on after that. Each night, I'd hear faint noises. Footsteps, soft knocks, the occasional whisper, too quiet to make out. And every morning, something would be different. A chair slightly moved. A door I'd shut standing open. Once, my phone recorded faint static on its own during the night. A hiss of sound that, when I played it back, carried something under it. A child's voice, whispering my name. I started keeping my door locked at night. I didn't tell my parents why, But I couldn't shake the sense that something had changed in the house. It didn't just feel haunted. It felt aware. Every sound had weight now. Every creak in the floor, every flicker of shadow made my pulse quicken. I could feel eyes on me even in daylight. By the end of that week, the air itself felt colder. The smell of the house had changed too. Less like home, more like damp clay and old dust. Friday night rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavy, hammering against the windows. Dad went to bed early. Mom stayed up watching an old movie in the living room. I sat in the kitchen with my laptop, trying to distract myself, but I kept hearing it. Faint tapping, somewhere deep in the walls. At around 10:40 p.m., the power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The house went dark, except for the flashes of lightning slicing through the windows. I heard Mom's voice from the living room. "It's probably the wind! Can you check the fuse?" "Yeah," I called back, grabbing a flashlight. The storm outside was relentless. Rain rattled the windows like gravel, and thunder shook the walls. As I walked through the hallway toward the basement door, the beam of my flashlight caught something on the floor, small, pale, half buried in shadow. It was a porcelain hand. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I followed the beam of light across the floor. There, sitting against the base of the hallway wall, was the doll. Its head was bent forward, its glass eyes catching the flashlight beam. One hand was missing, the same hand lying at my feet. My voice came out a whisper. How are you here?" A sharp sound echoed from behind me. The sound of footsteps, light and fast, scurrying across the wood. I turned. Nothing. When I looked back at the doll, it was facing the other way. I dropped the flashlight. The beam spun across the walls, catching a blur of motion. A shadow darting past the kitchen doorway. I shouted, "Mom!" "Stay in the living room." Her voice came faint, scared now. "What's going on?" Before I could answer, the flashlight flickered out. The house was plunged into total darkness. All I could hear was rain, thunder, and something moving through the house. Small, deliberate steps circling. Then came the first scream, Mom's voice. Sharp, high, pitched, full of terror. I sprinted toward the living room, tripping over something in the dark. I fell hard, my knee slamming into the wood. Lightning flashed through the window. Just for a second, and I saw her. Mom was standing in the middle of the living room, trembling, pointing at the fireplace. "The doll," she cried. It moved. The doll was sitting on the mantel, right where it had first been weeks ago. But now its head turned. Slowly, audibly. Click. Mom backed away, her hand covering her mouth. Then it turned again. Click, 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 until it faced completely backward. The air grew colder. The shadows along the walls seemed to crawl, pulsing like they were alive. "Where's Dad?" I shouted. Mom's voice cracked. "Hey, he's upstairs." Then we ran for the stairs, the house trembling under another crash of thunder. Halfway up, we heard him, a low groan, then a thud like someone had fallen. Dad, we burst into the hallway. The door to their room was open. He was lying on the floor, eyes open, breathing shallow, clutching his chest. I rushed to him. "Dad, it's okay, I've got you." He stared past me, his lips trembling. "She's here," he whispered. "She's here again." "Woo?" I asked. "Who's here?" But his gaze was fixed on the doorway behind me. I turned. The hallway light flickered, not from power, but from lightning outside, revealing the doll standing upright in the doorway. Its porcelain face was cracked wider now, one eye slightly askew, and then it smiled. The crack across its cheek moved as if it were flesh. Mom screamed. I lunged forward, kicked it aside. It hit the wall, shattered into pieces. For a moment, silence. Then, faintly giggle, not from the hallway. From the walls, the sound spread, soft at first, then louder, echoing through the vents, down the staircase, across the floors. A chorus of faint, childlike laughter filling every inch of the house. Mom clutched my arm, sobbing. "Make it stop! Please make it stop!" I grabbed her and pulled her toward the door, shouting, "We're leaving!" Now. But the front door wouldn't open. The latch stuck, rattling violently in my hand. Every window in the living room slammed shut at once, as if something unseen had forced them closed. The lights flickered back to life for just a second, enough for me to see the shattered pieces of the doll scattered across the floor. Except they were moving. Each piece, each tiny shard of porcelain, dragged itself slowly across the wood, scraping, twitching, reforming. The head lifted last. Its eyes rolled back into place, and with a sickening crack, it turned to face us again. I grabbed Mom's hand, pulled her upstairs, slamming my bedroom door shut behind us. She was shaking uncontrollably, whispering prayers under her breath. The sound of footsteps started outside the door. Not one set, several. Tiny ones. Crawling, dragging, circling the hallway. Then came a voice. A whisper. A little girl's voice, soft and broken. You shouldn't have locked me away. The door handle turned. Slow, steady, deliberate. I pressed my back against the door, holding it shut. Mom, stay behind me. Something on the other side began scratching. Fingernails. Porcelain. Whatever it was, the sound went straight through my spine. Then, silence again. For a few long seconds I thought it was over, until I heard breathing. Right behind me. Inside the room. For a few seconds I couldn't move. I stood frozen against the door, every muscle locked, my skin prickling with cold sweat. Mom whispered behind me, "What is it?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I could feel it. Warm air on the back of my neck. Slow, deliberate breathing. I turned barely, just enough to catch movement near the dresser. At first, it looked like nothing, a trick of the shadows. But then the shadows shifted. They took shape. A small figure stood there, no taller than a child, shoulders jerking in slow, uneven motions. Its head tilted as though it were trying to understand us. Lightning flashed outside, and for a heartbeat, I saw its face. It wasn't porcelain anymore. It was flesh, pale, smooth, stretched too tightly over something that wasn't quite human. The same blue eyes, glassy and wet. The same cracked smile. It was the doll, but alive. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The bulb shattered, plunging the room into darkness again. Mom's scream tore through the air. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the corner. "Don't look at it," I said, my voice shaking. "Just don't look at it." The thing's footsteps were small, erratic, the sound of something fragile dragging itself closer. Step drag. It stopped in the center of the room. And then, in the smallest, softest voice, like a child trying to whisper a secret, it said, "Can I stay?" Mom started crying, shaking her head. "No, no, please go away, please." It tilted its head. "But you brought me back." The words were sharp, echoing in the stillness like a blade through glass. I lunged forward, grabbing the old blanket from the bed, threw it over the figure, and kicked it backward. It fell hard, hitting the floor with a sound that was more meat than ceramic. I yanked Mom up. "Now," we ran. I flung the door open and pulled her down the hall. Behind us came the faint scrape of movement. It was getting up. The house was alive with noise again. Every door in the hallway slammed open at once, wind howling through the cracks. The lights flickered, burning bright white, then plunging us into shadow. Halfway down the stairs, Mom slipped. I caught her by the arm, but the flashlight clattered down the steps, spinning, its beam bouncing wildly across the walls, and landing on something at the bottom. The doll was there again, sitting upright, waiting. I froze mid-step, pulling Mom close to me. Her voice was a broken whisper. "It won't let us go." The doll lifted its head. One eye was missing now, just an empty black hole. But somehow that made it worse. "Why are you afraid?" it said. "You used to love me." Mom's knees gave out. She dropped to the floor, clutching her chest, sobbing. I didn't understand what it meant until I looked at her, really looked. Tears streaked her face. She whispered, "That name. The name from the box, my cousin. The one who stayed here years ago." I turned back to the doll. "Emily." Its cracked smile widened. "I waited," it whispered. "You promised you'd come back." My blood ran cold. "You're not her." It tilted its head, the sound of porcelain scraping bone. "I am now." The air in the house changed. Everything began to shake. Picture frames falling, walls groaning. The temperature dropped so low that my breath fogged white. I grabbed Mom, pulled her up, and dragged her toward the front door. I didn't care if it broke. I just needed to get her out. We reached it, and I rammed my shoulder against the wood. The door didn't move. The handle was ice, cold under my hand, like metal left in snow. Behind us, the sound of footsteps grew louder, faster, coming closer. I slammed against the door again. Once, twice until the latch cracked and the night air burst in. Rain poured down. The wind howled through the trees. I pushed Mom out first, then stumbled after her, gasping. The stormlight flashed across the yard, and that's when I saw the shed. The door was open. The light inside flickered like a candle, and on the shelf, just visible in the glow, sat another doll. Smaller. Dirtier, its head turned toward us. Mom screamed, backing away, falling to her knees in the mud. I turned to help her, but she wasn't looking at the shed anymore. She was staring behind me. I didn't want to turn. Every instinct screamed not to. But I did. The doll, the one from the living room, was standing in the doorway of the house. Its body half shattered, its limbs twisted wrong, but somehow still upright, and in its hand it held a small, broken porcelain face. My flashlight flickered once before dying. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed everything was its head turning, slow and stiff, toward the field behind the house, like it was watching something, or someone, out there. Then silence. I woke up sometime later to daylight. The storm was gone. Mom was still beside me, shaking, whispering prayers. The front door stood open, but the house inside was empty. No doll. No sound. Nothing. Dad was gone. We called the police. They searched for days. They found no sign of him. No footprints in the mud. No evidence anyone else had been in the house. When they asked about the doll, Mom said she'd never seen one. She looked right at me when she said it. Her eyes were hollow blank, like she wasn't herself anymore. We left that week. She refuses to talk about it. She won't go near dolls, won't even look at them on TV. It's been 3 months now. I'm back in the city. Things are quieter. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up to a sound I can't explain. A faint click in the dark, like porcelain turning. And every morning, when I leave my room, the door to the hallway closet is open, just a few inches. Inside, on the shelf, there's a small porcelain hand. One I know I didn't put there. He never moved back into that house. The doll was never found again, at least not by him. But 2 months after they left, the new tenants told the landlord something strange, that sometimes, late at night, they could hear a soft tapping sound in the hallway, like porcelain against wood. If you ever hear that sound, maybe don't go looking for where it's coming from. This was the doll that turned its head. If you have a true story you'd like to share, you can send it to Midnight Hunt. And remember, not every toy stays where you leave it.